Sunny and Jet looked like quite the pair. Both were wearing black, which made for a stark contrast with their pale skin and raven hair. Granted, Soul Reaper looked more imposing in her fitting black leather armor. Sunny, on the other hand, wore a simple silk tunic and a pair of dainty shoes. He was also unarmed. Actually, he was perhaps the more threatening of the two. People were used to seeing Awakened wear suits of impregnable armor and wield powerful weapons. It was the sight of someone who didn't feel the need to do so, even in the deadly reaches of East Antarctica, that was truly frightening. He made the last jump, landing softly on the ground not too far away from Effie. From here, Sunny could sense hundreds of shadows somewhere nearby. He looked around, noticing mundane soldiers and Awakened hidden here and there along the river shore, all keeping watch on the surrounding area. The first irregular company had numbered 42 Awakened and 7 Masters. The 2 companies Effie and Kai commanded, however, were different. Unlike the special unit Sunny had belonged to, these were companies meant for general combat. Each of them consisted of close to 100 Awakened and 10 times that many mundane soldiers, complete with a platoon of mighty MWPs and a robust stable of specialized vehicles that ranged from heavy artillery to support and resupply. 2 of these companies together made for a small army. Effie walked over with a wide smile on her face. "Sunny, long time no see." She looked quite impactful. His friend had always been a sight to behold with her impressively tall stature, athletic build, and generous figure. Now, however, Effie resembled an incarnation of a beautiful war deity, much more than she resembled a mere mortal. The main reason for this was her armor. It was as though Effie had been dipped in liquid steel, which then clung tightly to her body, tracing every toned, graceful line of it. Sunny had once thought that the undying chain felt like a second layer of skin. However, in his case, that was simply a metaphor. The armor of the vibrant huntress, on the contrary, could be described the same way, quite literally. There was a piece of white cloth tied around her waist, and another one covering her chest. But other than that, Effie's whole body was exposed and seemed as if it had been cast of lustrous steel. Only her head was uncovered, for now. That armor, of course, was the transcendent memory she had received after slaying one of the immortal chain lords of the Kingdom of Hope, the Sun Prince. Sunny coughed. Just looking at Effie would make one's blood run hot. But that wasn't all. Currently, she had not even activated her Ascended ability. Once she did, the fire burning in the hearts of the soldiers who saw her would become quite real, coursing through their veins and granting them actual power. It was as though Raised by Wolves was sharing some of her astonishing physical might with her followers. An involuntary smile found its way onto Sunny's face.
"What are you talking about? We saw each other 2 weeks ago."
Gods! Isn't that Soul Reaper Jet?
Holy hell, that's Soul Reaper Jet and Devil. No way, let me see.
I heard the 2 of them fought a corrupted Titan in the Antarctic Center. That can't be right, can it? They wouldn't be alive if they did.
Soul Reaper might be tough, but our boss is tougher.
I once saw Devil slaughter an entire swarm of nightmare creatures without lifting a finger. He just stood there and they were all shredded into little pieces. I swear to gods, it's true.
Sunny ignored the whispers and followed Effie. His shadows, however, took a good look around. He was about to go into battle side by side with these people, so he had to know all about them. The soldiers of the 2 companies looked competent, determined, and in high spirits. The Wolves and the Night Singers were technically not counted as special forces, but among the rank and file of the evacuation army, they had already earned the reputation of elite units. They were led by 2 of the most fearsome masters in the world, after all. The soldiers were mixed among each other, but, funnily enough, it was easy to see which belonged to which company. The Wolves were more boisterous, lively, and rough around the edges. The night singers were more calm, reserved, and good-natured. It was as if they had assumed the personalities of their leaders. Sunny smiled with the corner of his mouth, then shook his head. They walked along a row of camouflage tents and approached a particular one, which looked no different from all the others. Effie suddenly made a fist and banged it against her bare thigh, producing a loud metallic ring.
Wake up, Birdie. The most honest person in 2 worlds is here.
There was some rustling inside the tent, and then Kai emerged from it, looking as handsome and dazzling as ever. No, even more so. Sunny's face became a little dull. His friend had reached borderline criminal levels of attractiveness after becoming a master, mesmerizing most mundane humans by simply appearing in front of them. But Sunny had thought that a couple of months in the mud and muck of Antarctica would rub some of that glamour off. However, he had been sorely mistaken. If anything, Kai only became more captivating. His natural charm had acquired a hint of reserved military valiance, becoming more subdued but also much more arresting. His green eyes were still as electric as ever, but now there was a quiet, almost melancholic depth to them that made one deeply desire to comfort and console the young man. Those eyes were nothing short of compelling. Kai smiled, making all 3 of them, Sunny, Effie, and Jet, hold their breaths for a moment.
Sunny, Ascended Jet, it is so good to see you.
Even his voice was like a soothing melody.
That bastard.
Sunny wasn't even angry about how stunning his friend was. What disheartened him was what Kai was wearing. The archer was clad in a beautiful set of ivory armor that seemed to be made out of impregnable scales, with a few insets of burnished bronze blazing between them with reflected sunlight. It was tied at the waist by a sash of burnt umber color, which emphasized the rich auburn splendor of his hair. The armor was made of dragon scales and was a transcendent memory Kai had received after slaying the ivory dragon Severax. Both Effie and Kai had come into possession of a transcendent armor in the second nightmare. Sunny used to have an armor like that too, which he had gotten for killing Solvane for the first time, but of course, it had been destroyed by Goliath. And now he was the only person of the 3 without one.
That grinds my gears.
Sunny winced, but was then distracted from his resigned self-pity by Jet, who smiled and stretched her hand out for a handshake.
Ascended Nightingale, I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting you before.
They entered the tent, gathering around a fold-out table that had a small holographic projector placed on it. A topographical map of the area was projected into the air, with their location and the last known whereabouts of the skull centipede marked on it in red. Sunny, however, paid it no attention, still lost in his thoughts. After a while, he shook them off and honed in on the conversation. Kai was speaking.
There is simply no other path. The creature will try to cross the river near the ford, and so that is where we will ambush it.
Jet shook her head.
You're mistaken. It is large enough to ford the river anywhere. Its minions don't breathe, so they can simply walk along the bottom and crawl out of the water on the other side. The current is nowhere near strong enough to be an obstacle for them.
The charming archer sighed, then nodded.
That is correct, which was why I said near the ford, not directly using the ford. The landscape is going to push the tyrant into this general area, but we have no way of knowing where exactly it will enter the river.
Sunny frowned, already sensing where this was going.
So, what is the plan then?
Effie chuckled.
Well, what else? Since we don't know where it's going, we'll have to make sure that it comes to where we want it to come.
Sunny let out a resigned sigh.
So, who is going to be the bait?
Effie awkwardly scratched the back of her head.
I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to.
He remained silent for a moment, then scoffed. Kai smiled a little.
Honestly, it can be any of us. Oh, I'm sorry, Master Jet. I'm afraid I'm not entirely familiar with your capabilities. What I meant to say was that Effie, Sunny, and I all have ways of making sure that we survive, leading the creature to the ambush. So, any of us three can go.
Sunny slowly shook his head.
No, I'll go. I have to contribute at an earlier stage of the battle because I might not be of much use at the later stage.
It was true. With how close Sunny was to forming the Fifth Corps, chances were that it would pass the threshold right in the middle of a furious melee. If that happened, he would have to struggle to simply stay alive. As for being useful, he was not sure if he'd be able to do anything at all. The pallid centipede was slithering across a desolate landscape, followed by an army of abominable bone creatures. Its massive body tore forward, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. The ground was pierced and upturned by its 1,000 sharp legs, the ancient boulders shattered, and the brooks of clear water spoiled with its passing and turned into streams of poison. Soon, a wide river appeared in the distance. The ghastly tyrant did not slow down, continuing its ruinous advance. Then, however, the monstrous centipede slowed. Its appalling head swiveled, rising into the air. Its harrowing maw opened. The branches of the dead trees that served as the creature's horns swayed lightly in the wind. The wind had brought with it a strange sound, the distant weeping of a flute. The centipede lingered for a few moments, then suddenly changed direction, lunging toward the source of the discordant sound. It did not have eyes, but the black eye sockets of the countless skulls forming its carapace seemed to radiate dark, ineffable malice. The corrupted tyrant pursued the source of the simple melody. However, the flute player remained elusive, like a ghost. Sometimes the creature seemed to draw near the player, but he always managed to slip away at the last moment. All it found were empty shadows. However, at some point, the pursuit came to an end. The hideous centipede had almost reached the river by that point. In front of it was a natural ford formed by a line of enormous boulders, with only their tops emerging from the water. On the opposite side of the river, a lone human was sitting cross-legged on a stone, playing a strange emerald flute. It was a young man, with pale skin and dark hair, wearing a tunic of black silk. Sunny did not pay any attention to the harrowing centipede and continued to play the flute. His fingers moved nimbly, but the melody he created was pretty rough, to say the least. He sighed.
I thought I improved, but maybe not.
On the other shore, the tyrant froze for a second, then rushed forward. The creature dove into the river, raising a towering wave, and its soldiers followed. Some of the bone abominations jumped heavily across the boulders. Most simply dove into the cold water after their ruler. Sunny waited for a moment, then dismissed the bone singer and looked at the sky. The sun was still visible, but since it was close to the horizon, its light was dim. As he watched, several things happened at the same time. First, a series of explosions thundered, demolishing the boulders of the ford. Giant fountains of water rose into the air. Second, hundreds of human figures rose from the trenches dug higher up the slope. Third, a barrage of artillery shells and tungsten rounds descended upon the bone abominations from beyond the hills. The creatures shuddered, but resisted the mundane implements of war. Their progress, however, was slowed. That was when the awakened attacked. Numerous enchanted arrows and magical projectiles rained on the soldiers of the Skull Centipede's army. This time, the damage was apparent. A hulking creature that had just fallen into the river exploded into hundreds of bone fragments. Another lost a limb. Yet another was suddenly covered by a layer of sizzling amber liquid that corroded the bones. eating through them like acid, and more, much more. But that was just the start. Even though that initial salvo destroyed dozens of dreadful abominations, there were many hundreds of them left. There was the tyrant itself as well. A beautiful figure that seemed to be cast of steel appeared on the slope in front of the trenches, wielding a spear and a large round shield. Her voice boomed across the battlefield, filling the hearts of the soldiers with maddened fervor.
"Wolves, prepare for war!"
Sonny turned his head and glanced at Effie, feeling his blood boil from her battle cry. As he did, a strange thing happened. He suddenly felt exhilarating power rush into his body. It was as though he was suddenly as mighty as a ferocious beast, as resilient as a granite wall, and as sharp as a steel sword. And that was not just a feeling. His strength, speed, endurance, and resilience did indeed undergo a striking improvement. It was as though his body had received a comprehensive overhaul, becoming so much more suited for battle.
Incredible.
Every time he was exposed to Effie's ascended ability, Sonny couldn't help but feel awed. For him, who had already enjoyed the augmentation of the shadows, the physical boost was not that pronounced. But for the awakened soldiers, and especially mundane humans, it must have been a true blessing. The most frightening part, however, was that this ability had no limit to how many people could be empowered by it. Anyone who saw Effie and was deemed an ally by her would receive its benefit. Their number did not even affect the rate at which she consumed essence. The only detriment, albeit a small one, was that the soldiers had to maintain a line of sight with their commander to enjoy the boon of her power. However, considering that Effie almost always preferred to fight on the front line, that was usually not a problem. Just as he had expected, the eyes of the soldiers ignited with burning resolve at the sound of her voice. The soldiers of her company suddenly raised their heads and let out boisterous howls, acting like an army of actual wolves. And then, another voice joined them. This one sonorous and clear, easily drowning out all the rest. Kai's voice. When Sonny heard it, his heart suddenly shook. Instantly, all the unnecessary thoughts were erased from his head, leaving only the pure, flaming, indomitable desire to do battle. Even though this change was not physical, it might have been even more pronounced than the empowerment of Effie's aspect because it affected the heart. Even Sonny, for whom the effect was somewhat muted because of how guarded his mind and soul were, felt incredibly inspired. The clarity bestowed by Kai's call would do wonders for the soldiers in this battle. Sonny shook his head slightly.
Scary.
Kai's ability was just too terrifying. An Ascended would most likely be able to resist it to some degree, but mere Awakened had no choice but to be compelled. As for mundane humans, if the handsome enchanter chose to misuse his powers, they would do anything he told them to. They would happily end their lives if he asked. Luckily, Kai would never do that. Instead, he used his power to inspire the soldiers and make them stronger, with Sonny serving as a perfect scout, Effie strengthening the bodies of the soldiers, and Kai inspiring their hearts. The threat of the corrupted tyrant suddenly did not seem overwhelming. As the head of the skull centipede emerged from the water, it was met with a furious onslaught of attacks. Strengthened by their two leaders, the small army was burning with the desire and ability to win this battle. Before, the future seemed grim for the expedition force of the evacuation army, even though they numbered more than 2,000 soldiers, with 200 awakened and 4 masters ready to fight at the front. The enemy was just too domineering. The corrupted tyrant itself was tremendously dangerous. The army of bone monstrosities was no less threatening. However, both Effie and Kai were incredible sources of strength, acting as force multipliers for the whole regiment. With their help, the power of the soldiers soared, almost balancing the scale. Sonny's and Jet's efforts were no less important. Thanks to them, the two companies had been able to choose the battlefield and prepare an ambush. Terrain advantage was extremely valuable, and so was the foreknowledge of what the enemy was capable of. The last part was perhaps the most precious. The two scouts had gathered intelligence about the location of the enemy and the number of minions under its rule. They had also provided the analysts and diviners of the army with an opportunity to study the tyrant. Thanks to that, the human force did not have to go into battle blind. Even though they did not know every detail of what the Skull Centipede was capable of, they did know the most important parts. For example, they knew that the confluence of power that the giant abomination possessed was, surprisingly, hidden in the two dead skeletal trees that grew from its head, serving as the tyrant's crown and horns. Army command had gone as far as to suggest that the true abomination was not the centipede itself, but the network of tree roots that permeated its monstrous skull, growing through the creature's brain matter. As such, the small army's first goal was to destroy one, or better yet both, of these trees. Without them, the tyrant would most likely lose the ability to control its bone soldiers, as well as access to its most terrifying powers. But it was more easily said than done, and Sunny currently had other things to worry about, because the centipede was going directly for him. Ignoring the squall of bullets and the rain of arrows, it rose from the river like a mountain of skulls and lunged straight at him, the giant maw opening like an abyssal gate. Sunny blinked.
Are my flute skills really that atrocious? Listen, there's really no need to be that angry.
A moment before the dreadful tyrant crashed into the boulder he was sitting on, Sunny leaned back and dissipated into the shadows. The centipede plunged down, shattering the ancient stone and turning it to dust. Stone shards and a great deal of dirt flew into the air, rising like a cloud. Sunny finished a small backward roll, much further up the slope, reappearing behind the trenches and the mass of soldiers. He rose, flicked a few pieces of dust off his tunic, and glanced in the direction of the giant abomination. The skull centipede turned its head in the direction of the firing soldiers, its jaw still hanging open. Then its enormous body tensed, ready to shoot forward. Before it could, however, something flashed through the air and impacted against the tyrant's head. The mysterious projectile was none other than Effie, who had used her own body as a siege ram. After rushing through the battlefield like a hurricane, she jumped and made her body into a ball, hiding it behind the round shield. When the dusk shard struck the tyrant, numerous skulls were instantly pulverized into bone dust. However, even more were revealed, becoming visible through the crack in the morbid carapace. The force of the impact was so tremendous that it not only slowed the centipede down, it actually threw the abomination back, pushing it back into the river. Effie herself was tossed to the ground and landed in a roll, jumping back to her feet a moment later. Her sculpted steel body did not look damaged at all. If anything, the huntress looked as exuberant and robust as ever. As her war cry resounded across the battlefield, the first wave of the hulking bone abominations clashed against the line of awakened. A ferocious melee exploded into a cacophony of ear-piercing noise. The tide of nightmare creatures seemed unstoppable, as if it would easily wash the human fighters away in a wave of desperation and blood. But it didn't. The first reason for that was Jet, who threw herself into the flood of abominations a few moments before the clash and broke the enemy's momentum. Her Naginata easily passed through the layers of bone, destroying the rotten skulls of the tyrant's minions. Both the bone puppets and the Soul Reaper herself could be considered living dead. However, even among the dead, she was an exalted existence. The second reason was the awakened themselves. Even though most of the ghastly abominations were fallen, it barely looked as if there was a gap of power between them and the human fighters. Empowered by Raised by Wolves and emboldened by Nightingale, The soldiers fought with might and ferocity that was far beyond what they should have been capable of. It was really quite astonishing to see. Sunny shifted a little.
Time for me to enter the fray as well, I guess.
He had to act restrained in this battle. However, that did not mean that he couldn't do anything. More and more bone fiends were crawling out of the river, and the skull centipede itself had already recovered from Effie's devastating blow. It was lunging forward once again, this time aiming for the ironclad huntress. Sunny opened a leather satchel that hung on the silk cord tied around his waist and took out a small, intricately engraved stone lantern. Then, he tossed it across the battlefield, aiming for the line where the shore met the cold water. As soon as the shadow lantern landed, it was as though all light was devoured from the wide area around it. Many bone abominations entered the sphere of darkness. However, none of them emerged again, as if swallowed by the shadows. Well, of course they didn't. After all, out there in the darkness, unseen, Saint was already waiting for them with the Sin of Solace in her hand. After unleashing her on the battlefield, Sunny concentrated on using shadow manifestation to reduce pressure on the soldiers. He tried not to destroy any of the bone abominations himself, maiming and suppressing them instead. Despite his efforts, however, a generous stream of shadow fragments poured into his soul, threatening to render him defenseless too soon. Sunny frowned, then looked in the direction where Effie was trying to distract the skull centipede and prevent it from reaching the trenches. She was holding the tyrant at bay, barely, for now. A dark grimace appeared on his face.
It's all up to Kai then.
High above the battlefield, hidden by the cold radiance of the sun, a small black dot was slowly growing larger. Effie was having a hard time standing her ground against the giant centipede. In fact, she was barely holding on. Even though a furious barrage of bullets, enchanted arrows, and magical projectiles was raining on the ghastly carapace of skulls, the abomination did not seem slowed down at all. Its massive body moved with dire speed, thousands of scythe-like legs tearing up the ground with each motion. The difference in size between the tyrant and the fearless huntress was just too big. Effie's only saving grace was that her body, despite being hundreds of times smaller than that of the ghastly centipede, seemed to contain truly astounding strength. She was incredibly swift and agile as well, dashing around with stunning speed to dodge the crushing blows of the monstrous creature. Above everything else, the huntress was all but invulnerable. Her innate resilience was reinforced by 2 aspect abilities and then strengthened by a transcendent armor on top of that. She had received several glancing blows from the abomination, which would have turned almost any other master into a broken corpse. Effie, however, was able to shake them off and continue to fight. Of course, there was no such thing as true invulnerability. The huntress was fine for now, but she was still dancing with death. The round shield she wielded possessed an enchantment called Indomitable, which functioned similarly to Sunny's own Feather of Truth and allowed Effie to change its weight at will. Her spear was not able to deal serious wounds to the tyrant, but its strikes must have stung. Sunny saw the creature recoiling after the huntress managed to land a solid blow. All that allowed Raised by Wolves to tie down the skull centipede, at least for a short while. However, it did not mean that she would win. It took all Effie had to simply match the menace of the corrupted tyrant's massive body, all her abilities, all her skill, and all her powerful memories, while the abomination had not revealed any of its powers yet. Once it did, the situation would inevitably change, and that moment had already come. As Sunny watched, Effie managed to push the centipede back once again. The shock wave of the impact threw her back as well. The huntress slid through the dirt, leaving 2 grooves in it. Her spear shot down, piercing the ground and bringing her to a sudden stop. A moment later, she was already lunging forward, ready to deliver another strike. However, the tyrant seemed to be fed up with their furious clash. Raised its appalling head, the branches of the dead trees growing from the carapace of skulls swinging in the wind. Sonny's eyes widened slightly as he felt a sudden chill run down his spine. It was as though the wind that brushed against the skeletal branches was full of tormented whispers. A small black dot appeared in the air between the 2 trees. The dot was warped and twisted, collapsing in on itself and then beginning to grow, devouring the fabric of reality itself. It seemed as if an abyssal gate was starting to open in the air above the creature's head.
Crap!
Sonny instantly knew that nothing good was going to happen if the circle of darkness was allowed to finish forming. He made a move to step forward. But at that moment, a stream of light tore the sky asunder. Falling from somewhere high above with inconceivable speed, it streaked across the battlefield like a flaming comet and crossed paths with the centipede's head, exploding with blinding radiance. A low boom resounded, followed by the sound of shattering wood. Kai had arrived. The plan of the battle the 4 masters had come up with assigned each of them an important role. Sonny was responsible for luring the tyrant to the ambush site and creating an obstacle for the bone fiends crawling out of the river. Jet was meant to lead the defenders and make sure that the trenches were not overrun. Effie's role was to stall the centipede and, more importantly, distract it. But it was Kai who was the key to their success or failure. The whole plan depended on whether the tyrant would be able to unleash its harrowing powers. To prevent it from happening and reduce the skull centipede to a mere giant beast, the trees growing from its head had to be destroyed. That was what Kai had to accomplish. He had hidden himself high in the sky and bid his time, waiting for an opportune moment. Then, the archer plunged down, burning his essence and using gravity to reach truly astonishing speed. And now, he delivered his attack, using that speed to close the trap they had set. The flaming comet was Kai himself, and he held a slender, shining saber in his hand. All of it happened in the blink of an eye. The streak of light crossed the creature's head, something flashed, and then a loud explosion boomed, washing over the battlefield. A split second later, Kai fell into the river. His speed was still so tremendous that he slid across the surface of the water without plunging into it, and only slowed down after being pushed 100 meters away from the shore. The head of the skull centipede, meanwhile, was flung to the side. One of the dead trees crowning it was completely shattered, its trunk exploding into thousands of sharp splinters. The circle of darkness collapsed and disappeared without a trace, never receiving the chance to fully form. Sonny let out a relieved sigh. It worked! The tyrant opened its maw, letting out a blood-chilling screech. The bone fiends trembled, becoming disorganized and somewhat sluggish. The soldiers roared with dark glee, invigorated by the sight of the giant creature losing one of its horns. Effie was already advancing, her spear ready to strike. Kai had managed to regain his balance and pushed himself off the surface of the water, shooting back into the sky and summoning his bow. A black arrow suddenly shot out of the cloud of darkness surrounding the shadow lantern. Empowered by Saint's transcendent strength and the Death Dealer enchantment, the arrow struck the neck of the tyrant with harrowing force, annihilating layers of skulls and ripping a huge chunk of flesh out of it. However, Sonny did not pay much attention to it, because right at that moment, the spell whispered into his ear.
You have slain a fallen monster.
Malignant root sapling. Your shadow grows stronger.
Sunny froze, his face turning deathly pale. Here we go again. Spell grew louder.
Your shadow is overflowing with power. Your shadow is overflowing with power. Your shadow is taking shape. Your shadow.
Sunny did not have to summon the runes to know that he had finally accomplished his goal. After absorbing thousands of shadow fragments, his soul was ready to form a new shadow core. His fifth one. He was about to become a tyrant. A conflicting mess of emotions rose in his heart. Of course, Sunny felt a sense of joy and triumph. His power was about to take a significant jump after all. The bleak, dreadful months he had spent in Antarctica, enduring hardships and grisly defeats, made this moment possible. In a sense, this was his reward. And so, the invisible scars he had been left with were not for nothing. On the other hand, this boon came at a very unfortunate moment. In the past, Sunny had been mostly able to time his advancements in a way that allowed him to go through the process in relatively safe conditions. A battlefield where hundreds of Awakened were fighting against an army of fallen nightmare creatures and a corrupted tyrant, however, was in no way safe. And on top of that, he had already gone through this ordeal 3 times. He knew how much it was going to hurt. Hell yes! And also, damn it! Sunny glanced at the skull centipede, who was reeling from the dreadful blow dealt to it by Saint's arrow. A huge chunk of flesh was missing from its neck, with bone dust and rivers of fetid blood spilling into the river. Effie was moments away from reaching the wounded abomination, her sculpted steel body glistening in the sunlight. And Kai was preparing to draw his bow. One of the dead trees had been destroyed, which was supposed to rob the tyrant of its most terrible powers. However, the outcome of the fight was still far away from being set in stone. A corrupted tyrant was still a corrupted tyrant. Sunny felt that Effie, Kai, and Saint had a good chance of emerging victorious from that fight, but he couldn't be sure. Jet and the awakened soldiers were struggling to hold back the tide of bone fiends. Sadly, for now, there was nothing much Sunny could do to help them. The rest of the battle was up to others to win. As a hint of terrible pain appeared in his soul, Sunny hurriedly jumped backward. Hiding between 2 mounds of dug-up dirt, 2 figures emerged from his shadow. One was a fearsome black stallion. The other was a scrawny little imp. He gritted his teeth and looked at his shadows. "Protect me!" Then, Sunny lingered for a moment and threw a glance at Nightmare. A cold smile appeared on his lips. "Oh, and if the little bastard does something stupid, you have my permission to eat him, Nightmare." The Dark Destroyer snorted in calm agreement, while the imp stared at him with shocked outrage and fear. Sunny grinned, then turned white as a sheet and swayed. His hand rose, grabbing at his chest. "Oh, this is the worst!" A familiar, but no less dreadful agony overwhelmed his entire being. Sunny was momentarily blinded and deafened, losing all sense of the world around him. Something was rising from the depths of his soul, tearing at it with sharp edges. The torment of it was nothing short of exquisite. He had experienced this pain several times before, but it grew more and more unbearable with each time. Human souls were not supposed to possess many cores, neither were they able to sustain them. It was only because of Sunny's divine aspect that his soul had become stronger, growing vast and powerful enough to endure the strain. Nevertheless, this was not in its nature. Therefore, the birth of a new core brought with it immeasurable pain, with each successive one hurting more. The first time Sunny had gone through the process, he had been rendered absolutely helpless, thrashing on the ground and wailing like a dying beast. The second time had brought him to his knees, making his screams echo in the desolate halls of the ruined Chalice Temple. The third time, Sunny had managed to remain silent, up to the point when the body of the shadow spawn he had been occupying started to change too. The pain had grown more intense with each new core, but Sunny had also grown more resilient. He had been through so much and had experienced so much that the journey through the endless procession of nightmares alone would have been enough to drive anyone mad. And so this time, Sunny endured. He did not fall down, remaining on his feet. He did not scream. He did, however, lose all track of time and of what was happening around him. All that remained was agonizing pain and the sensation of something being born within his soul. It lasted for an eternity, but then, eventually, the eternity had ended. Sunny realized that he could hear again. He knew that because he heard the voice of the spell whisper into his ear softly,
"Your shadow is complete."
And mercifully, the pain ended. He inhaled deeply, trembling. He felt stronger. His body had become stronger. His reserves of essence had grown the most by far. Most importantly, he was now in possession of the fifth shadow. And he was a tyrant. A tyrant! Sunny exulted. A complicated emotion grasped his heart. Finally, after years of struggling and chasing after something that often seemed unreachable, he had caught up with Nephis. Sure, she was still ahead of him by a sizable amount of fragments, but they were of the same class now. They were both ascended tyrants. Strangely enough, Sunny did not care too much. He had wanted desperately to be as strong as Changing Star once. There had been a lot of reasons for him to harbor that desire, some better, some worse. And now that he had reached that goal, Sunny knew that his former understanding of what real strength was had been terribly misguided. And so, he did not really care. Still, it felt nice to be equal to her on paper, even if what was written in shimmering runes was not that important. Now, for the important stuff. Sunny shifted, turning his head to observe the battlefield. There was another tyrant nearby, and that tyrant posed a threat to his friends and the soldiers, so the creature had to be dealt with. Sunny was still reeling from having his soul torn apart and then sewn back together. However, the battle was raging, so he had no time to recover in peace. That was fine. He was long used to fighting in the most dire conditions anyway. It took him only a moment to assess the situation. It seemed that he had been out of it for quite some time. The battlefield was ravaged and upturned, the river itself slightly changing course. Its water, which had been clear once, now seemed muddy and noxious. Effie and Kai were still fighting the ghastly centipede in the shadows, with Saint supporting them from the darkness. The three seemed to be doing fine. The soldiers, however, were straining to hold their ground. The slope of the river shore was littered with shattered bones, and hundreds of the tyrant's abominable minions had already been destroyed, but there were hundreds more. And now that Saint was busy turning the skull centipede into a pincushion and weighing it down with the help of the Burden of Peace enchantment of Morgan's warbow, there was no one to serve as the wave breaker against their tide. There was only Jet. Soul Reaper moved like the beautiful visage of death among the bone fiends, erasing one after another from existence. But she was just one woman. No matter how fast and lethal, she couldn't be in several places at the same time. Sunny hesitated, trying to make a decision. His instinct was to go for the biggest threat, personally removing it from the equation. However, The tyrant was still strong and ferocious. Even without most of its powers, the centipede was putting up a dreadful fight. It was hard to say how long it would take to bring it down. The soldiers, meanwhile, would continue to suffer under the onslaught of the bone fiends until it did. So what was he supposed to do? Follow his habits and race to kill the tyrant? Or act against instinct and put his trust in Effie and Kai, concentrating on reinforcing the ordinary soldiers instead? Sunny sighed.
Instincts are great, but humans rose above beasts for a reason. And thanks to reason.
In the end, no matter how unnatural it felt, he could do no better than follow the plan. The role he had been assigned was to lure the tyrant to the ambush and then put obstacles in the path of the Bone Army to make it easier on the awakened and the mundane soldiers. So Sunny was going to put himself between the abominations and the humans. Before plunging into the fray, he dismissed Nightmare and the little imp. They had already done their job by guarding him. Throwing the two into the mass of fallen enemies would do more harm than good. Then, Sunny glanced down at the shadows gathered on the ground in front of him. The first four were his old companions, the gloomy, happy, creepy, and haughty fellows. The fifth one, however, was new. The fifth shadow seemed naive and good-natured. Even though it was not as boisterous, the guy resembled the happy shadow a little bit too much. So much that Sunny couldn't help but feel that its amicable disposition was just a front, and behind that front, he could sense a hint of boundless deviousness. The shadow was up to no good. It was clearly full of all kinds of mischief. He raised his eyebrow and sighed.
You're a naughty one, aren't you?
The naughty shadow stared at him, radiating nothing but innocent surprise. Eventually, the shadow shook its head with utter sincerity. It seemed a little hurt. It was as though the shadow was saying, "Who, me? Oh no, of course not. I would never." Sunny squinted his eyes.
Yeah, right. Well, let's go then. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're in the middle of a battle.
The shadow looked at him, then scratched the back of its head and glanced at its siblings, as if unsure what to do. When the other four shadows moved forward to wrap themselves around his body, though, it quickly followed. A feeling of overwhelming strength permeated Sunny's body. He inhaled deeply, getting used to his new limits. Then, caught sight of Effie breaking a dozen of the tyrant's legs with her round shield. Instantly, his limits were expanded even further. Sunny smiled, summoned the cruel sight, and dashed forward. At the same time, he used the Blessing of Dusk to establish a mental bond with Jet and coordinate their movements. She moved to her right. Soul Reaper was going to be responsible for the western half of the defensive line, while Devil was going to rampage in the eastern part. Shadows surged forward. In the next moment, the sound of breaking bones rolled over the battlefield. In the end, it was Kai who brought down the skull centipede. Saint had debilitated and slowed it down with her arrows, which allowed Effie to deliver a devastating blow to the creature's head, cracking its skull. Of course, that alone would have never killed the corrupted tyrant. However, it did give Kai a chance to deal a fatal strike to the ghastly abomination. Flying across the sky, he positioned himself above the centipede and drew his bow. This time, an arrow of incinerating flame appeared on its string. The heat of the arrow was so dreadful that it seemed as if the world itself was melting around it. Luckily, Kai was protected by the armor made from the scales of a dragon. Unaffected by the immolating heat, he let the fiery arrow loose. It flew down like a streak of light, entering the creature's skull through the thin crack. Then, a dreadful explosion illuminated the tyrant's head from the inside. Tongues of flame and streams of smoke shot from its mouth, from the pit where the broken tree had been, and from the empty eyes of the countless skulls. The centipede's own indestructible giant skull seemed as if it was going to burst open for a moment, but in the end, it didn't. Trailing smoke and fire from its head, the creature swayed and then heavily crashed to the ground. The skull centipede
was dead. With the tyrant gone, its minions lost all remaining cohesion. Effie, Kai, and Saint were also freed to attack them from behind. Caught between them and the main body of the expedition force, the Bone Army swiftly dwindled. It wasn't long before it was annihilated. Looking at the battlefield, which was covered in broken bones, Sonny took a deep breath.
I can't believe it. A plan worked. I think that's a first.
The battle was over, but the soldiers had no time to relax and celebrate their victory. They did not even have time to collect the soul shards and other spoils from the army of slain abominations. Instead, as soon as the fighting ended, everyone got busy preparing for an immediate retreat. That was the nature of the war in Antarctica. No matter how terrible of a foe you defeated, a dozen more were just beyond the horizon. They were in enemy territory. The ferocious battle against the skull centipede had not taken a lot of time, but it had created a lot of noise. Already, several hordes of nightmare creatures were flowing across the plain, converging on the location where the battle had taken place. Unless the expedition force wanted to drown in an endless flood of abominations, it needed to disappear as soon as possible. Sonny, Jet, Effie, and Kai were gathered in front of the skull centipede's massive corpse, careful to steer clear of the water. They did not know what the poison was exactly, but the river was visibly tainted. Even in death, the corrupted tyrant continued to spread death and destruction. They had just retrieved the 5 transcendent soul shards from the ghastly carcass. That was the extent of the trophies the expedition force was going to carry back with it. The huntress looked at the hundreds of dead abominations laying on the ground and sighed.
What a damn pity. That would be enough for an entire cohort of sleepers to saturate their cores.
Sonny felt a bit regretful too. The monetary value of all these shards would have been astronomical. Granted, now that the chain of nightmare had flooded the waking world with abominations, the price of shards was not what it had been before. He knew it from his occasional correspondence with Eiko. He shook his head.
That might be true, but what's the use of having all these shards if we die before reaching a siege capital?
Kai nodded.
Indeed, we have already reaped the main benefit, preventing the tyrant from growing stronger and reaching one of the human settlements. Our casualties were light, too. That's a win in my book. Anything else is irrelevant.
Sonny knew that his friend was right. Nevertheless, he could not help but sigh with regret. At least his luck had been good, granting him several ascended memories. None seemed particularly useful, so he promptly fed them to Nightmare. That was already a good result for one day. After a short pause, Sonny said,
In any case, good job, everyone. That went much smoother than I thought it would. Especially you, Kai. That was an insane shot.
Sonny knew a thing or two about archery. Shooting an arrow through a thin crack in the skull of a moving target, while flying at high speed, was one for the books. The charming archer had been the one to destroy the skeletal trees as well. Kai smiled shyly.
Thank you. To be honest, I can't quite believe it. I never thought that I would kill a corrupted tyrant one day.
His green eyes turned slightly wistful, as if he was recalling the past. Sonny blinked a couple of times.
What on earth are you talking about? Can't believe it. Says the guy who jumped into the mouth of a dragon to kill it.
Kai coughed, while Jet glanced at him and raised an eyebrow.
A dragon? What kind of a dragon are we talking about?
The archer shook his head.
It was just a transformed saint in the Nightmare.
This time it was Soul Reaper's turn to blink.
Ascended Nightingale killed a saint?
Her voice sounded a little dull. Effie suddenly laughed.
What about it? I killed one too. A huge pain of a bastard. And that one,
she pointed at Sonny.
He killed the same saint twice. Speak about holding grudges.
Jet rubbed the back of her neck with a neutral expression.
And I thought my second nightmare was exciting.
At that moment, Kai turned his head slightly, as if listening to something.
he was most likely receiving a message through his comm. And indeed, a few moments later, he called out to them.
"Everything is ready. We can depart in 3 minutes."
Sunny let out a relieved sigh. The two companies had been quick to organize themselves for a rapid march, and so they would be able to leave before any of the migrating hordes arrived. Kai looked at Sunny and Jet, then at Effie. Then he asked hesitantly,
"Oh, are we going to take my ride or yours?"
Effie scoffed.
Does it matter?
She grinned and answered her question a moment later.
Of course it matters. Do you think that I don't know how pampered you are by your soldiers? That guy. It's unfair. He has a fan club, even in the army. They bring him all kinds of little gifts, including snacks and sweets. So I think we need to celebrate. And I think you're treating.
Kai looked away in embarrassment.
Those aren't gifts. People are just concerned about their commander. I can't refuse. They would become sad if I do."
Sunny grinned.
Whatever you say.
The archer shook his head.
"All right then. We will ride in my APC. We can work on compiling a report for Army Command in the process, too."
With nothing more to discuss, they hurried to leave the scene of the battle. Riding a personnel carrier at the head of a column of soldiers made Sunny remember the cold, dark days in the Antarctic Center. Kai's APC was a little shabby when compared to the robust, beautiful Rhino. Still, it got the job done. And the charming archer had some delicious stuff squirreled away in the nooks and crannies of the heavy machine. The expedition force left the ravaged river shore behind and rushed across the plain, escaping the approaching mass of nightmare creatures. They masterfully navigated the landscape, avoiding the wandering swarms and keeping out of sight as well as they could. The column had to fight off a few packs of abominations, but these skirmishes were too inconsequential to pay them any attention. Things like that were unavoidable when a large force traveled across Antarctica. Everything was going well, but of course, it had not gone well for long. The APC was a little cramped, but the four masters were able to make themselves comfortable. They were sitting on empty ammunition crates, enjoying some of the snacks Kai had presented them with. The mood in the interior of the armored vehicle was surprisingly relaxed, and the awakened crew under the archer's command were respectfully giving them some space. Effie was talking.
Wait. What? This is hilarious.
The conversation had taken a random turn, leading to Kai sharing the details of how he and Sunny first met. At the time, one of them had been imprisoned in a deep well, while the other had gone more than a little feral after living alone in the dark city. The huntress knew what had happened in broad strokes, but this was her first time hearing the full story. She couldn't stop laughing.
I can just imagine it.
Effie wiped her eyes, then glanced at Jet and asked with curiosity,
What about you, Colonel? How did you become Sunny's fairy godmother?
Soul Reaper smiled, leaning back with a can of refreshing beverage in her hand.
What's a fairy godmother? Is it some kind of nightmare creature?
Effie stared at her for a few moments, then shook her head despondently.
What's a fairy godmother? They really are two peas in the same pot?
Jet chuckled.
I guess not. Well, there's not much of a story. I'd been assigned to hold vigil over an aspirant, and that aspirant turned out to be Sunny. It's rare for us kids from the outskirts to survive the first nightmare, so I keep in touch.
Sunny let out a relieved sigh when he realized that she wasn't going to describe the exact moment he had woken up, and what transpired right after. There was no need to give Effie more ammunition. If Jet spilled the beans, he would never hear the end of it. He opened his mouth to change the topic, but at that moment, the sound of an urgent message resounded in the interior of the APC. Sunny did not like that sound at all. Looking up at the communication terminal, he frowned. Almost at the same time, his comm vibrated, receiving a message as well. As Kai rose to access the terminal, the other three checked their comms. The messages Sunny and Jet had received were probably a little different, since the Special Reconnaissance Unit was privy to more information, but the gist of it was the same.
Damnation.
Sunny glanced at his friends, reading the same somber tension on their faces. The chain of nightmares had just gone into another period of rapid escalation. Dozens of gates had opened across East Antarctica at the same time, and the initial readings showed that most, if not all of them, were of the third category. Much worse, it had already been confirmed that several Titans had emerged, ready to wreak havoc across the continent. Even though the three Saints had slayed several such creatures in the past months, the situation was still eerily similar to what had happened in the Antarctic Center. Would the entirety of the evacuation army be able to handle the sudden crisis? Sunny was not sure. Their chances were much higher than what the Antarctic Center contingents had been, but still, things had just gone from bad to worse. Jet sighed.
More Titans, huh? I wonder if any of them are corrupted.
Effie continued to munch on her snack, seemingly unbothered by the dire news. She simply shrugged.
We'll find out soon enough. There is no point in worrying about it now, is there?
Soul Reaper grinned.
True. Well, unless one of those Titans happened to appear right between us and the siege capital.
The Huntress suddenly stopped chewing, which was very abnormal behavior in her case, and glared at Jet silently.
Colonel Jet, you just had to go and say it, didn't you?
At that moment, Kai returned from the terminal with a troubled face. He looked at them for a few moments, then sighed.
There has been a change of plans. The path we were supposed to take back was no longer available, so Army Command sent orders to reroute the expedition force. We will be retreating to a different city to be stationed there until further notice.
Effie sighed and shook her head despondently.
See?
Sunny and Jet glanced at each other. They had not received new orders, so the SRU still expected them to accompany the two companies. That was a relief. Kai turned to them and forced out a smile.
Sunny, Ascended Jet, we will have to trouble you with helping us navigate the wilderness, as well as provide help to our scouts. I hope you don't mind. If everything goes well, we'll be behind walls in 3 days.
Sunny looked around.
Why would we mind? This is like a luxury hotel. I haven't been fed this much delicious stuff in a while.
A small smile appeared on his face. Kai nodded.
Great. Then please excuse me. I'll go arrange for the column to change course.
He went back to the communication terminal, leaving the three of them alone. Sunny sighed, the smile disappearing from his face. 2 days passed in a tense but manageable atmosphere. The expedition force was persisting in its march, traversing the Great Plains of East Antarctica with acceptable speed. The skirmishes they fought increased in frequency and ferocity, but with Sunny's shadows scouting out the way, they were able to escape major battles. The rest of the continent was not doing as well. East Antarctica was in turmoil, with the assaults on the siege capitals growing more dreadful every day. The evacuation army was holding, for now, but the future seemed grim. At the same time, the Saints had united to face the rampaging Titan. Their battle had lasted for several ruinous hours and ended in a bitter draw. 2 of the Titans perished, but the Transcendent had to retreat, each sustaining heavy wounds. Several more creatures remained, including one confirmed corrupted Titan. For now, none of them was actively moving toward the siege capitals, but it was only a matter of time.
Bad. This smells bad.
Sunny was at the back of Kai's APC, sitting on a crate with his eyes closed. His shadows were out scouting, and Jet sleeping on a neighboring crate, using a military coat as a blanket. Suddenly, her communicator produced a melodic sound. Since it was not a notification from Army Command, Sunny paid it no attention. Soul Reaper, however, sat up, yawned, and glanced at the message with a sullen expression. She remained silent for a few moments, then grimaced and showed him the screen of the communicator. Sonny opened his eyes and read the title of a government propaganda article attached to the message. His eyes turned a little darker. The title read, "The Great Legacy Clans announce full support for the Southern Quadrant evacuation effort. In humanity's hour of need, its greatest warriors are rising against the forces of the Nightmare spell. The best of Bastion and Ravenheart are already en route to reinforce the valiant soldiers of the evacuation army." Sonny remained silent for a long time. Then he leaned back with a sigh. His thoughts were dark and heavy. Deep in his heart, an ember of anger smoldered, divorced from all reason, pushing him to do dangerous and short-sighted things. It was almost as if the Sin of Solace was whispering into his ears,
Kill them all. How hard would it be to simply kill them all?
probably not much easier than slaying the Winter Beast, and with much more dire consequences. Shaking his head, he looked at Jet. They had never spoken about it directly, but she knew the real reason why the great clans were coming to Antarctica. After all, Soul Reaper had a much more extensive information network. She was deeply embedded into the hierarchy of the government and had a personal connection to some of its leaders. Of course, the government was only a second-rate player in the grand scheme of things. Still, they played an important role, and as such, had access to a lot of secrets. He lingered for a few moments.
What do you think will happen now?
Jet covered her mouth with a hand, yawned, and then smiled.
Right now?
Well, let me think. I guess the first thing that will happen is that I am going to receive a message from the old man. Just as she finished the sentence, her communicator lit up, displaying a new notification. Soul Reaper chuckled quietly, then concentrated on the screen of the military-issue device. See? It's a curse to always be right. Give me a minute. Sonny waited for her to finish reading the important message, and it was important indeed. The old man Jet had mentioned was none other than Saint Kor, the Wake of Ruin, one of the two government transcendents. Sonny had met him briefly after coming to East Antarctica, and the man left an impression. Wake of Ruin was a tall, gaunt man in his late 50s. Although his skin was showing signs of aging, his hair remained perfectly black, like the feathers of a raven. The saint had sharp features, a piercing gaze, and a stern demeanor, acting like a person who was used to both wielding power and bearing responsibility. Wherever he went, a slightly sweet, sickening scent followed. Sonny was intimately familiar with that scent. It reminded him of the smell of the battlefield, or rather, what remained after the battle was over. Saint Kor was not a likable person. However, it was hard not to feel respect for him. The government transcendent was not as renowned and awesome as the saints of the legacy clans. For a saint, he was strangely low-key, but his age alone told volumes about what kind of man he was and what ordeals he had lived through. Wake of Ruin was not quite in the same league as the legendary figures like the Immortal Flame and Nightwalker, since he had been a young child when the spell first descended. However, he was still a member of the first generation, and as such, had watched and helped build the world order of today. Even if Saint Kor had become transcendent later than the members of the second generation like Anvil and Keysong, he was still, in a sense, their elder. Sonny did not know what the arrangement between the government and the great clans was exactly, but the mere fact that Wake of Ruin was allowed to be excluded from the rule and did not serve any of the sovereigns hinted that there was more to the old man than appeared on the surface. He was the field commander of the whole Antarctica operation, and Jet seemed to enjoy quite a close relationship with the veteran saint. She was one of his most trusted agents, so it wasn't a surprise that Soul Reaper would be one of the first people to be contacted by Wake of Ruin after the news of the legacy forces coming to the Southern Quadrant was made public.
Lucky me.
Sonny did not have close ties to the upper echelons of the government, but as Soul Reaper's confidant, he would be privy to the vital information almost as soon as she did. Come to think of it, he also has eyes and ears inside Valor thanks to Nephis and Cassia, and enjoyed the friendship of one of the heirs of the House of Night. He even had a bond with Saint Bloodwave and was friendly with the Whitefeather clan.
I guess I'm better connected than I thought I was.
And that was without even considering his venerated status in the evacuation army. Waiting for Jet to finish reading the message, Sunny grinned.
Maybe I should seduce one of Shan's sisters, just to complete the trifecta.
Those women from the Great Clan's song, Kisong's adopted daughters, were all a bit scary, though.
Well, there's Mordred as well.
The naughty shadow gave him a sly glance, making Sunny blink a couple of times.
What? What the hell are you on about? I didn't mean it that way. I was talking about befriending the bastard, not seducing him.
The shadow tilted its head. If it had a face, there would have been an innocent smile on its lips, and sparks of dubious sincerity in its eyes. Sunny gritted his teeth.
Damnation, I've only known you for a couple of days, but I am already starting to regret it. What is wrong with you, miscreant? Look at the other guys. None of them were ever problematic.
To prove his point, Sunny gestured in the direction where the other shadows were, diligently scouting out the path for the column. He could vividly imagine their reactions, though. The gloomy shadow would cross his arms as if trying to say,
"Who are you pointing at, you idiot?"
The happy shadow would nod energetically, expressing something like,
"Of course, we would never cause problems for our master. Master, you're the best."
With all its being. The creepy shadow would stare at him with its usual creepy inexpressiveness, but its thoughts would probably be easy to guess. It would probably be something like,
"I wonder what it would feel like to slice the new guy open. What do his insides look like? What is the texture? Do shadows have insides? I want to know."
The haughty shadow would have its usual arrogant look, radiating the, "Keep me out of this plebeian conversation, peasant," feeling with its disdainful pose. The naughty shadow glanced at Sunny with amusement. Sunny sighed.
All right, point taken.
Eventually, Jet put away her communicator and stared into the distance for a few moments, thinking. Then she turned to Sunny. He asked,
"So, what's the word?"
Soul Reaper had a contemplative look on her face.
"The good news is that we're getting reinforcements.
Both Valor and Song are sending strong contingents.
2 Saints each,
a handful of masters, and a supporting retinue of hundreds of awakened. All of them the absolute elites of the legacy clans. Of course, some direct descendants, some loyal retainers. You can imagine how powerful a force that is." Sunny nodded. Despite his animosity toward the great clans and those legacies that served them, even he had to admit that these people had not ended up in the position of the highest power by accident. Legacies were born and bred to be perfect warriors, and in that pursuit, they were ruthless, both to their enemies and to themselves. An awakened from a legacy clan was worth their weight in soul shards on the battlefield. It was only when compared to the survivors of the Forgotten Shore that they did not seem that exceptional. But the former dreamers of the Dark City were an abnormality themselves. Hundreds of legacy awakened could achieve a lot in East Antarctica, but whatever they could do paled in comparison to the arrival of 4 more saints. That was the real game changer. More than doubling the number of transcendents present in the Southern Quadrant in one swoop, with 7 saints leading the charge, the position of the evacuation army would be tremendously bolstered. That was if the newcomers had any intention of helping the evacuation effort along, and not just thwarting it. He looked at Jet with a gloomy expression.
"What's the bad news, then?"
She shrugged.
"Well, you know, the great clans have their plans. They are going to have to keep up appearances at least, but who knows what they really have in mind."
Sunny remained silent for a while, then nodded slowly.
"And what is the government going to do about it?"
Jet laughed.
"You really think they would send such information in a message?" I mean, the military network is supposed to be protected, but come on.
He thought about it, then shook his head. Soul Reaper chuckled.
In any case, we'll know more soon. I've been informed that the Legacy forces will be arriving in 2 batches. The second one is already sailing across the ocean, carrying most of them. 2 separate naval convoys, of course. Otherwise, gods know what would happen.
She lingered for a moment.
The second, smaller batch will be arriving much earlier, though. They'll be here in no more than a couple of days, coming through the Dream Realm. The Vanguard consists of 2 saints and 4 masters, from what I've been told. And, what a coincidence, they'll be coming directly to the siege capital we're heading for.
Sunny smiled slightly.
Is it really a coincidence?
Jet shook her head.
Of course not. Kor is actually already there, assembling a welcome party. He kindly requested for me to participate. Oh, and he asked me to bring you along.
Sunny looked at her with surprise, a frown appearing on his face.
What? Wake of Ruin singled me out directly?
He wondered. He raised an eyebrow.
Me? Why does he want me, of all people, to be there? I don't even work for the government, really. There are certainly better candidates.
Soul Reaper smiled and shook her head.
Because you were one of the deadliest masters on the planet, Sunny. And more importantly, you're not affiliated with any of the Legacy clans. At this point, Kor would have to be crazy not to try and use you as an asset.
Sunny felt pleased to receive her praise, but not at all happy with the contents of that praise. He leaned back and crossed his arms.
And what if I don't want to be used?
Jet laughed.
Well, you can always go away and live as a hermit in the Dream Realm. Other than that, my advice is to get comfortable being used.
She thought for a bit,
and then added, but not too comfortable. Make sure to use the people using you in response, at least.
Sunny blinked a couple of times.
What the hell kind of perverse wisdom is that?
He thought to himself. He scoffed before continuing.
That's either a very profound or an entirely shameless statement.
Soul Reaper grinned.
It's probably both. But anyway, that's for future. We have to get to the siege capital first, and with how things are going, that might be a bit of a problem.
Sunny grew serious. Jet was right. For the past 2 days, things went more or less well for the expedition force, but the last day was bound to be the most difficult, because they were leaving the wilderness and approaching the area surrounding a human settlement. By nature of the chain of nightmares, these areas were the most dangerous of the continent. A constant stream of abominations was flowing toward the siege capitals to assault their walls, and the closer one got to a city, the higher the concentration of nightmare creatures was. Fighting a pitched battle was inevitable if the expedition force wanted to reach the gates of the human stronghold.
Yeah, let's make sure that everything goes smoothly first. We can worry about legacies later.
The immediate task might not have been as grandiose, but it was a priority right now. Jet had given up on sleep, and Sunny felt sufficiently rested. They left their corner of the APC and joined Kai on its roof. The archer was alone, quietly studying a bow made of dark ashen wood. The weapon radiated an eerie aura of nebulous power, alienation, and lethality.
What a dreadful thing.
Sunny waved at him.
New memory?
Kai looked away from the bow and forced out a smile. Yeah, I received it for slaying the malignant grave root. It's a daunting bow to use, to be honest. Sunny wanted to ask to take a look at the ashen bow, but at that moment, a loud roar resounded from somewhere up ahead, and Effie's voice came in through their comms.
Ah, damn it. That swarm Sunny scouted an hour ago? They're coming sooner than we expected. Get ready.
Sunny, Jet, and Kai glanced at each other, then sighed. Summoning their best memories, the last day, indeed, was promising to be really troublesome. However, the smell of blood attracted a migrating horde,
so the expedition force had to fight their way through the flood of nightmare creatures as well. Eventually, the column broke free and escaped into the vast plain, but the peace was short-lived. Very soon they had to fight another skirmish, which grew into another battle, which grew into an unending onslaught of enemies that threw themselves on the speeding vehicles without reprieve. The mundane soldiers fought admirably, although not as experienced as the veterans of the First Army. These men and women had also tasted their fair share of bloodshed and strife. Everyone was calm and collected, performing their duties with deadly efficiency and poise. Their performance was immaculate, and their morale seemed unshakable. Was it because the Second Army had not lived through the same hopelessness as the soldiers in the Antarctic Center? Or was it because Effie and Kai were able to inspire them better than Sonny had been able to inspire his soldiers? He was not sure. Regardless, the Wolves and the Night Singers were a spirited bunch. The Awakened were as resolute as the Mundanes. Although fewer in number, the impact they had on the battlefield was immeasurably higher. All kinds of aspects worked in harmony to create an impenetrable death zone around the column. The abominations that managed to survive it were promptly dispatched by the melee fighters. And of course, the influence of the Four Masters was even greater still. Effie was serving as the vanguard of the expedition force, cutting a bloody path for the vehicles to follow. Her lustrous figure weaved through the mass of abominations, leaving devastation in its wake. The bodies of the creatures she killed were left crumbled and broken, as if an invisible colossus had crushed them under its feet as it walked across the vast plain. The blows raining on her sculpted steel body in turn rang against metal without ever slowing her down. Kai was soaring high in the sky, observing the rolling battlefield in its entirety and taking out the most dangerous creatures before they could approach the column. His arrows seemed to have a mind of their own, unfailingly slipping through the tiniest cracks in the armor of the abominations. Usually, one arrow was all it took to bring even the most fearsome creatures down. His secondary role was to protect the expedition force from aerial attacks. And in that task, the archer performed admirably as well. Jet was protecting the rear of the column, holding the pursuing enemies back. Her throwing stars fell like iron hail, seemingly numerous. Each carried the same dreadful ability as her melee attacks, striking directly at the soul cores of the abominations. Such a manner of fighting was bound to burn through essence with terrible speed. But that was what made Soul Reaper Jet so frightening of an opponent. As long as she kept killing, her essence would never run out. And in such a furious battle, Jet was free to slaughter as many enemies as she could. And finally, there was Sonny. He was sitting on the roof of the APC with his eyes closed, controlling numerous shadows. All across the column, inky black hands made of darkness appeared out of nowhere to protect the soldiers and press nightmare creatures down into the ground, making them easy to slaughter. For now, there had not been a single casualty thanks to the watchful shadows. Keeping the whole expedition force safe was not easy. In fact, the length of the column was well beyond the reach of his shadow sense, and therefore out of the area where he could use shadow manifestation. But Sonny was using a little trick. He had stationed his 5 shadows throughout the column, each serving as an island of his consciousness. His senses and his ability to control wild shadows were extended many-fold that way. He could summon Saint to help out too, but for now, Sonny was holding back from calling upon the taciturn knight. The truth of the matter was that he wanted to keep her existence hidden. More or less everyone who had learned of their connection in the Antarctic Center was either dead now or could be trusted to keep the secret. Here in East Antarctica, he had mostly acted alone in the wilderness or side by side with Jet, so Saint had not been exposed. The only exception was Song Shan, but she had last seen the taciturn knight in the catacombs below the Dark City. Saint had changed a lot since then, both visually and in terms of rank. Connecting her past and present self would be almost impossible. As for the legend of Mongrel, No one knew who he was and where he had come from in the first place. More than that, after the events of Falcon Scott, many people believed that Mongrel had fallen heroically while protecting the last siege capital. From what Sonny had heard, there was already an epic propaganda film about the life and tragic sacrifice of the mysterious swordsman being cooked up back in the NQSC. He shuddered at the thought. In any case, Sonny was handling the battle fine, for now, and he wanted to keep Saint as his hidden ace for a while. That was why he had only summoned her within the sphere of darkness created by the Shadow Lantern during the battle against the malignant Graveroot. Although I'm not sure if I can keep this up much longer. As the siege capital drew nearer, the onslaught of the nightmare creatures only grew more intense. Sonny was already struggling, and his reserves of essence were swiftly reducing. Something had to change, and soon it did. He smelled it before he felt it. A sweet, sickening scent was suddenly carried over by the wind. Then, the battlefield was suddenly shrouded in a vast shadow. Sonny opened his eyes and looked up at the thing that had blotted out the sun. Above them, a myriad of crows filled the sky. There were numerous thousands of them, all circling like a giant whirlwind of darkness. As he watched, the countless crows pivoted with eerie synchronicity and dove down. Their black beak and vicious talons emanated a sense of dead sharpness. The myriad of crows was Wake of Ruin. That was his transformation. What came in the wake of a bloody battle? A swarm of carrion birds. The Saint had arrived to guide them into the city personally. Ever since coming to Antarctica, Sonny had been to so many underground strongholds and attended so many meetings in windowless rooms that all of them started to blend together. They all looked the same and felt the same. Even the people inside the rooms started to seem the same after a while. This time, however, he found himself in a stately and luxurious hall, which was a nice change of pace. The interior was tasteful but lavish. The tall windows let in natural sunlight. The filtered air was cool, crisp, and fresh. What was there not to like? He was relaxing in a comfortable chair, idly waiting for Wake of Ruin to arrive. Jet was nearby in a similarly laid-back pose. The Transcendent had summoned them immediately after the expedition force had reached the siege capital, and yet he was running late. Neither of them minded. They had barely had time to wash the dirt of the road off themselves before coming to the spacious hall. After weeks spent in the wilderness of East Antarctica, every moment of leisurely pace was like a precious gift. Sonny was lazily thinking about the outcome of the latest battle. After the swarm of crows had descended on the nightmare creatures, hundreds of them were torn apart in an instant, and the slaughter did not stop until the column was safely behind the city walls. The sight of it was frightening and magnificent in equal measure. What a powerful transformation. Of course, he wouldn't go so far as to say that Wake of Ruin's transcendent form was more powerful than that of, for example, Saint Tyrus. Rather, they were best suited for different tasks. The government saint excelled in battles against large numbers of nightmare creatures or potent adversaries who did not possess a lot of physical defense. He was also extremely hard to kill, since that would require exterminating every single one of the myriad of crows, although there would probably be some repercussions for Saint Cor if the swarm sustained heavy losses. Skytide, on the other hand, could deliver a much more dire punishment to a single powerful enemy. Her ability to control wind and lightning also made her a more versatile and well-rounded saint. Sonny tried to imagine what would happen if the two transcendents clashed. The mental image of a giant thunderbird being swarmed by a vast whirlwind of black crows in the dark skies was truly an awesome one. Who would win? He was not sure. Saint Tyrus would be at a slight disadvantage due to being robbed of one of her trump cards. True, she often relied on aerial superiority to slay her foes. But then again, Saint Cormac had also been a flying beast. That had not prevented her from tearing off his wyvern head. Jet glanced at Sonny and smiled. "You're thinking about murder again, aren't you?" He turned his head and gave her an impassive look.
Yes? Why?
Soul Reaper laughed. No reason. Sunny studied her with a contemplative expression. Come to think of it, her crow echo was a strange one. Was there, perhaps, a connection between it and the Saint of Carrion Birds? He wanted to ask, but at that moment, the doors of the palatial hall opened, and Wake of Ruin himself walked in, looking as tall and gaunt as ever. A subtle scent of rot and slaughter followed the old man like an invisible mantle. Saint Cor was wearing an austere military uniform that had an insignia of 4 stars emblazoned on its sleeve. His sharp, pale face was framed by unruly raven-black hair, and his dark eyes were staring at them with bleak dullness. When he looked at Jet, however, a hint of cold fondness appeared in the weathered lines of his unfriendly face.
Soul Reaper, Ascended Sunless, welcome.
His voice was hoarse and a bit grating. They had both stood up when the Saint walked in, so he gestured for them to sit. Then Wake of Ruin took a chair opposite them.
How did your last mission go?
They glanced at each other. Jet was the one to respond. It was all right, sir. We scouted a corrupted tyrant, met up with the wolves and the night singers, and helped them to take the creature down. Casualties were minimal. He nodded, seemingly indifferent to the news of a powerful creature being slain, which was only to be expected. As the field commander of the entire operation, Saint Cor must have been receiving reports like this quite frequently. His next question, however, was a bit surprising.
How did you like it in the SRU?
Jet lingered for a moment. I like it just fine, sir. The old man shifted his gaze, subjecting Sunny to a piercing stare.
And what about you, young man?
Sunny shifted uncomfortably, suspecting that there was a hidden meaning to the question. He shrugged.
I feel like it's a good fit for my abilities.
Wake of Ruin studied him for a few seconds, then nodded.
Good. You've performed admirably as advanced scouts. However, it's a waste of your talents.
Both Sunny and Jets straightened, looking at the Saint with slightly startled expressions. Noticing their reaction, the old man remained impassive.
Consider yourself reassigned, effective immediately. The proper paperwork is already being delivered to the SRU headquarters.
What?
Sunny stared at him. Just like that, they got a new job? Without even being asked? Jet cleared her throat. Many questions were burning in Sunny's mind, but she asked the most important one. Sorry, sir, but reassigned to where? Saint Cor stared at her for a moment, then pointed to himself.
My retinue. That's officially, unofficially, however. You'll be acting as special envoys assigned to the Legacy Forces. Each of you will be a contact person between the evacuation army and the great clans.
Sunny suddenly hated how opulent and lavish the spacious hall was. He frowned.
With all due respect, sir, I get why Ascended Jet might be considered a good candidate for such a position. But what do I have to do with any of it? Surely you must know that my relationship with the great clans is a bit rocky. That is not even mentioning whether I want the job or not.
He had spent 6 months hiding in the waking world to avoid the wrath of Clan Valor, after all. Had the old saint gone senile or what? Wake of Ruin turned his heavy gaze back to Sunny and calmly raised an eyebrow.
On the contrary, I think that you are the best person for the job, Ascended Sunless. You are quite close to one of the leaders of the Valor delegation. No?
Sunny tilted his head a little.
That depends on who that leader is, I guess.
Saint Cor smiled slightly. The smile made his gaunt, pale face look even more unnerving. The old man glanced at an antiquated wristwatch adorning his hand, and then said, his voice sounding cold and aloof,
Why, it's young Lady Nephis of Valor, the changing star, of course.
He looked away from the watch and added, matter-of-factly,
"She'll be arriving alongside Valor's other emissaries soon. I think they'll be here in a few minutes."
Sonny's eyes widened.
He certainly knew that Neff was coming to Antarctica. But why is Wake of Ruin calling her one of the leaders? Huh? And she's coming in a few minutes?
Sonny stared at the veteran saint, dumbfounded. He had been anticipating meeting Neff again for a long time, but now that it was mere minutes away, his thoughts were in disarray.
Did she check out my runes recently? Does she know that I'm a tyrant now too? Wait, no, why do I care if she knows or not? I shouldn't.
Jet seemed a little surprised too.
Weren't they supposed to arrive in a couple of days?
Saint Cor shrugged.
They were, but with Tyrus receiving some free time due to the three of us being beaten black and blue in the last battle, the schedule has been moved up. Ascended Sunless and you arrived just in time.
Sonny tried to digest the information. He knew that the legacy reinforcements would be coming in 2 waves. The second one consisted of the bulk of their forces, traveling by sea, while the first one was supposed to be the Vanguard and consisted of just a few people. They were going to travel to Antarctica through the Dream Realm. The process was both simple and complicated. They needed a saint who had already established a tether in the southern quadrant. In this case, Saint Tyrus. The members of the Vanguard had to either already be anchored in the same citadel as she, or be brought there by a different transcendent. Then Skytide would be able to bring them with her to the waking world, thus transporting the necessary people to Antarctica. The Vanguard had to be small, because saints were limited in how many living creatures they could carry with them between the 2 worlds, just like masters were limited in how much inanimate weight they could bring. Usually a saint could only transport 1 or 2 people at a time, and that consumed a fair amount of essence. Coming to a sudden realization, Sonny looked around. He was starting to understand why such a lavish place was chosen for their impromptu meeting. The opulence of the Grand Hall was not for the benefit of 2 Ascended. Wake of Ruin was rolling out the red carpet for the powerhouses of the great clans. He looked at the old man, thinking. Saint Cor smiled.
I'm starting to suspect that you are not of a very high opinion about the great legacy clans, young man.
Sonny gritted his teeth, trying to hide contempt and anger from seeping into his gaze.
That is putting it lightly, sir.
The old man studied him with a bit of curiosity.
Why?
Sonny gathered his thoughts, trying to come up with a convenient answer. Eventually he said evenly,
I guess it boils down to the fact that they are traitors.
Wake of Ruin raised an eyebrow.
Traitors? Interesting. How so?
Sonny sighed.
Awakened are supposed to be humanity's sword against the spell, no? The legacies are the greatest of the awakened, and yet they've seemingly given up on challenging the spell. Much worse, they refused to come out of the sheath when we needed them. This whole disaster could have been salvaged if they had done their duty.
He had not mentioned the millions of people who had died in the Antarctic Center, and neither had he mentioned the tens of thousands of soldiers that perished with them. He doubted that such numbers could touch the heart of Saint Cor. The old man was one of the leaders of the government, after all. People like him viewed the world in terms of billions of lives, spread across many decades. If Sonny told him that he was burning with anger toward the great clans because of the death of 3 awakened, the old man would have probably thought him crazy.
I see. Indeed, as long as you know anything about the world, it is easy to dislike the great clans. It is even easier to dislike them if you know a lot. But forgive me for sounding like a grumpy old man, Ascended Sunless. Young people like you lack perspective.
Sonny looked at him somberly.
Do we?
Saint Cor nodded.
It's not your fault, of course. One had to be there and live through the worst of it to understand. You see, Ascended Sunless, and you too, Jet. People of your age were born in a stable world. It might be a cruel world and a harsh world, but it is a stable one nevertheless, because it has been built that way by your predecessors. Many tend to look at the flaws of the world, but very few stop to question its foundations. And those foundations, why, they might have been better, but they could have also been so much worse.
He leaned back in his chair, looking into the distance with a neutral expression.
The fact of the matter is that the great clans emerged from the chaos of the past, but they weren't the only ones fighting for power and dominance back then. There were other clans, other forces, and people with entirely different ideas about what the world should become. The things they did, it is a blessing, really, that those old monsters were buried in the past, and that the great clans ended up victorious. So yes, you lack perspective.
Sonny frowned.
Other forces? Different ideas? No offense, sir, but you have some nerve saying such things to two people who grew up in the outskirts. Others might not feel the same way, but we enjoyed the premium experience of living in this stable world you praise so much. I struggle to imagine what ideas could have been worse.
Saint Cor looked at him coldly, then suddenly laughed. His laughter sounded like the caws of a hungry raven.
Ah, you are a direct person, Ascended Sunless. I like it.
He looked at Sonny with his dark, harsh eyes, the hint of mirth that had appeared in them for a moment, dissipating without a trace. The gaunt old man shook his head.
But you should make an effort to imagine it. A dying world ravaged by war. People who had all but forgotten how to be proper humans. And then, an even bigger disaster, but one that presented a great opportunity. An opportunity for some of them to become unimaginably powerful, unmistakably superior, entirely unrestrained, and all but unstoppable. Free to make whatever they wanted from this new era. Freedom, young man. Freedom can be the most appalling curse in the world if it falls into the wrong hands. It is a terrifying thing.
Wake of Ruin grew silent for a few moments, and then smiled sarcastically.
Here I go rambling again. Jet, you should have stopped me. In any case, our guests should be arriving any second now. The emissaries of valor will come first, and the emissaries of song will follow in a few hours. Help me welcome them, you two.
He paused and looked at Sonny, and added in a neutral tone,
For better or worse, the great clans are all we have now. We'll need their help to see this operation through. So, keep that in mind, young man.
Sonny lingered for a bit, then reluctantly nodded.
I can play nice, or at least pretend to play nice. We'll see how it goes.
He didn't say any of that out loud. Before Sonny could answer, the atmosphere in the lavish hall seemed to change slightly. It was as though a wave of invisible energy rolled through it, making the air feel colder and sharper. Wake of Ruin sighed and turned around, looking at the space in the middle of the spacious chamber. It had been empty before, but now 4 people were standing on the lacquered floor, surrounded by the scent of the dream realm. For a moment, it felt as though they were simply a memory of a forgotten nightmare. But then, the feeling disappeared, and they were simply there. It was not often that Sonny saw saints enter the waking world, and he had to admit that it was an eerie thing to witness. Were awakened and mundane people as startled when he suddenly appeared out of thin air in front of them? That idle thought streaked across his mind and disappeared without a trace when Sonny realized who exactly he was looking at. His eyes widened slightly. 4 people, and by coincidence, he knew each of them. The first was Skytide, the saint of the Whitefeather clan, appeared as she always did, tall, slender, with a posture like that of an arrow. She wore a light armor of lustrous steel, and her hair fell like a cascade of pale gold. Tyrus looked austere and beautiful, but also slightly inhuman because of her strange amber eyes and vertical pupils. She stood apart from the other three, who all wore intricate suits of lusterless black armor. The first of the three immediately attracted Sonny's gaze. His heart moved slightly. Nephis looked different in the colors of House Valor. The black armor created a striking contrast against her ivory skin, silver hair, and cool gray eyes. She looked like a beautiful dark spirit that took the form of a deadly night to sow the seeds of discord and ruin in the mortal world. The second person was Morgan of Valor. Every time Sonny saw her, he was unnerved by how much she resembled her older brother. However, although Morgan and Mordred looked very much like reflections of each other, her demeanor was entirely different. Morgan had black wavy hair and alabaster skin. Her suit of armor was adorned by a vermilion cape, which was the same vibrant color as her vivid scarlet eyes. Her entire being radiated the feeling of lethal sharpness, as if she were a living blade. However, it was the third person that made Sonny's eyes widen in guarded shock. He was a tall and severe man, with sharp facial features and even sharper eyes. His hair was black as Morgan's. In fact, there was a lot of familiar likeness between them, and touched by silver at the temples. His strong figure radiated an almost palpable feeling of authority and pressure, and his steely blue eyes were calm and piercing. The armor he wore was simpler than that of the other two, as though the man did not need its protection. A deep frown appeared on Sonny's face.
Saint Matic? What the hell is he doing here?
Indeed, the man was none other than Saint Matic, the Whispering Blade brother of Anvil, and the nominal leader of the great clan. As Sonny watched, Sir Matic turned his head and smiled calmly, somehow making his smile look both friendly and demanding of submission.
Wake of Ruin!
The gaunt old man was standing in front of Sonny and Jet, staring at the newcomers with a neutral expression. He lingered for a moment before saying in his hoarse voice,
Whispering Blade, I have to admit your appearance is a bit of a surprise.
Maddox's pleasant smile widened slightly.
Isn't it only right for me to be here? My clan announced its full support for the brave men and women of the evacuation army. That, of course, includes my assistance.
Sonny tried to read the silent conversation that was happening between the two transcendents. Surely their words had other meanings. Saint Cor was probably trying to understand why the Sovereign had gone as far as to send his brother to Antarctica. Matic, in turn, was letting him know that Anvil was putting a lot of importance into what was about to happen in the southern quadrant. Whispering Blade laughed slightly, then raised his hand.
However, you shouldn't be addressing me. I'm just here to offer support and make sure that nothing untoward happens. The true leader of this expedition is my niece, Morgan. She will be in charge of everything.
He gestured toward Morgan, and then threw an even gaze at Nephis.
And of course, my other niece will be supporting her in this endeavor. I trust you know Changing Star. The three of us are the vanguard of the Valor Force.
Wake of Ruin remained silent for a few moments, then nodded slowly toward Morgan.
In that case, welcome to Antarctica, Lady Morgan, Lady Nephis.
He threw a heavy glance toward Whispering Blade, and then said evenly,
How curious that there are two saints in your group, as well as the granddaughter of a mortal flame. And yet, all three of you seem to be subordinated to a young woman with no known achievements to her name. Some could see it as a sign that Valor is not taking this matter seriously.
Morgan looked at the fearsome transcendent and then smiled. It seemed that his barely disguised provocation did not affect her whatsoever. Her voice was calm and indifferent. "You are mistaken, Saint Cor. Clan Valor takes this matter extremely seriously, which is why I have been entrusted with considerable power and authority." Wake of Ruin sighed.
Forgive this old man for being frank, Lady Morgan, but what kind of authority can a mere Ascended wield? I have half a dozen Titans wandering the continent and 27 cities to protect. What can you do to alleviate my problems?
Morgan shrugged silently and then took a step back. Matic, Tyrus, and Nephis remained motionless as a whirlwind of sparks suddenly filled the spacious hall.
What the?
As Sunny watched, an echo manifested from the hurricane of sparks, and then another, and then another. 3, 6, 12, 15. A few moments later, the large hall suddenly did not seem as large anymore. 15 harrowing nightmare creatures filled it, each giving off a sense of vast and dreadful power. Sunny stared, suddenly feeling cold.
Transcendent. They are all transcended echoes.
How many thousands of corrupted nightmare creatures had to be slaughtered to produce these echoes? The weakest of them was a transcendent demon, while the most powerful was a transcendent titan. And that was only what Morgan had chosen to show. Who knew what she kept hidden? The Princess of War smiled politely as she looked at Wake of Ruin. "These are my credentials. Are you satisfied, Transcendent Core?" 15 transcendent echoes, most of them devils. Sunny simply stared, mentally recalculating the threat of the Valor Force and the great clans in general.
I knew, of course, that the hidden power of the Sovereigns is vast, but it seems that I've been concentrating on their might too much, mostly because it is both mysterious and phenomenal. However, there is the mundane power of accumulation as well. I've been a fool to neglect it,
he thought to himself. To everyone else, a corrupted abomination was a dreadful nightmare, even to saints. Transcendents fought against the corrupted and were more than capable of slaying them. But every such fight was a risk, especially against the creatures of higher classes. The Supremes, however, were equal to the great nightmare creatures. Sunny had been under the impression that the Sovereigns mostly stayed within the confines of their domains. But maybe he was not entirely right. Someone like Anvil or Keysong could slaughter corrupted abominations with the same ease he could butcher awakened creatures. It only made sense that they had accumulated a legion of powerful echoes over the decades, including scores of transcendent ones. Sunny suddenly broke out in a cold sweat.
Hell, who says transcendent echoes are the limit?
Since the Sovereigns could fight on equal footing with great nightmare creatures, then didn't it mean that they could possess supreme echoes as well? To this day, Sunny had only seen 2 great abominations. One was the unborn spawn of the vile thieving bird, and the other, most likely, was the dark sea of the Forgotten Shore. What would it look like if a creature like that was ever turned into an echo? Was Morgan in possession of a supreme echo? Did she have an echo of a titan slumbering in her soul sea? He lingered for a moment, then glanced at Nephis, who stood in front of the army of monsters with an impassive expression on her calm, beautiful face.
You want to destroy this?
He closed his eyes for a moment.
Damn that lunatic. She must have infected me with her madness, because I want to make these bastards pay too.
At this point, it was hard to say whose madness was more virulent. Sunny shook his head, then looked at Wake of Ruin, who was staring at Morgan with an unreadable expression. Eventually, the old man said in an even voice,
"Put those things away. They'll ruin the floors."
What?
Sunny muttered inaudibly. Morgan tilted her head a little and silently dismissed the echoes. St. Cor nodded.
Good. I see that your clan is as shrewd as ever. These echoes will be of great help, if used correctly, of course.
Sonny was thinking feverishly.
St. Tyrus is a vassal of Valor, but the reinforcements they sent are all direct members of the clan. Matic, Morgan, Nephis, and one more saint, who is escorting the main force across the ocean. With these 15 transcendent abominations, they alone could be considered on par with the entire evacuation army, if not more powerful than us. And the forces of Song will be just as powerful.
There was already one saint of the Song clan in East Antarctica, a vassal just like Skytide. 2 more were coming, both direct members of the clan, as well as several hundred awakened and several powerful masters. Who would these people be? What hidden aces would they bring along?
Is that guy coming?
Surely he was. Mordred had joined Song to avenge himself on Valor in the first place. He wouldn't miss a chance to make his former clan bleed. The Prince of Nothing alone was more frightening than 15 transcendent echoes. Sonny almost groaned.
These bastards are going to destroy the entire continent.
Even though Antarctica was meant to be merely a prologue of the War of the Great Clans, that prologue was already promising to be the most chilling of disasters. It would be a cataclysm. Everyone in the hall must have understood the magnitude of the approaching collision. However, no one seemed rattled by it. Wake of Ruin and Jet seemed a bit somber, but calm, too jaded to be shaken by the promise of appalling bloodshed. St. Tyrus was reserved and stoic. Matic and Morgan hid it well, but Sonny could see bloodlust and readiness in their eyes. As for Nephis, she appeared the calmest of them all. She might have fooled everyone else, but he knew what kind of hatred dwelled in her burning, murderous heart. The more the members of the great clans killed each other, the more exhilarated she would be. As he thought about the grim prospects of the nearest future, Morgan looked around with curiosity. Her voice had a hint of anticipation in it. I see that our colleagues from the Great Clan Song have not arrived yet? Wake of Ruin nodded.
Indeed. They'll only be here in a few hours. Really, that makes things awkward for me. There is a lot we need to discuss regarding the current situation on the continent and your future role in keeping it in human hands. But what am I supposed to do? Repeat myself all over again when the Song Vanguard arrives?
He shook his head with resignation. Sonny could just imagine that war meeting. 3 sides discussing important matters of strategy, with everyone present perfectly aware of the fact that most of the gathered powerhouses were actually planning to kill each other, and with the few bystanders only wondering about how to make them kill each other in the most convenient way. All the while pretending not to know anything, of course.
What a joke.
It was really funny. He barely held back laughter. At that moment, St. Cor suddenly threw a glance toward Jet and Sonny. His grating voice resounded in the spacious hall.
So, make yourselves comfortable for the moment. We'll convene when the other party arrives. These are 2 of my best people, by the way, Ascended Jet and Ascended Sunless. You all know Soul Reaper, so I won't say anything. Young Master Sunless, however, has only earned his reputation recently. The soldiers are calling him the Devil of Antarctica, from what I hear.
The veteran saint chuckled.
A fitting name if I ever heard one. In any case, these 2 will be my envoys for your 2 great clans. Timeliness has to be rewarded, so pick one. I'll send the others to accompany the Song people.
Both Sonny and Jet stared at him, not sure how to feel about being handled that way. It was as if they were livestock. Precious livestock, but still.
What a rude bastard.
Sunny turned to look at the emissaries of valor, frowning slightly. Morgan glanced at him, then studied Jet for a while. Eventually, she smiled. Why, we'll take Master Sunless. He's my dear sister's former companion, after all. I feel like we're good friends already. Soon after, Sunny found himself in a very strange situation. He was left alone with 3 emissaries of the great clan Valor, Changing Star, Morgan, and Whispering Blade himself. 2 of the most powerful people in the world were right here in front of him, speaking with each other casually. And of course, Nephis was there too. The waiting room they had been led to was comfortable and spacious. Food and refreshments had been served by the staff members, and it seemed as if the 4 of them were having a friendly get-together back in NQSC. The only difference was that everyone was wearing armor. Well, except for Sunny himself. Still, he fit right in with the members of Clan Valor due to his black tunic. He sighed.
Speak about strange bedfellows. That is what they call sleeping with the enemy, huh? Wait, neither of these sentences sounds right.
Lamenting the poor sense of whoever had come up with these idioms, Sunny reached for a plate and loaded it with all kinds of food. Supplies were a sore point for the evacuation army, but Wake of Ruin must have decided to go all out today. There were a lot of things on the table that would have been almost impossible to procure anywhere in Antarctica, except maybe on the black market. The pile of food attracted the attention of Morgan, who observed him for a few moments and then raised an eyebrow. Her vermilion eyes had a hint of amusement in them. Are you very hungry, Master Sunless? He glanced at her somberly, then shook his head.
Well, if you must know, I spent the last couple of weeks in the wilderness, scouting out the migration routes of a horde of nightmare creatures. Then I had to lend a hand in a battle against a corrupted tyrant, and came to meet you pretty much immediately after that. But no, I'm not that hungry.
He leaned back and raised his heavy plate.
However, one of the first things Antarctica teaches you is to eat when you can. Who knows when I'll have a chance to have a proper meal again?
Whispering Blade chuckled.
So not too different from subjugating the Dream Realm, then. Morgan is a bit too young to remember, but back when human territory was actively expanding, it wasn't rare for Awakened to spend years in hellish conquests of untamed regions. Good food was more precious than soul shards.
The saint looked at his niece with an outwardly benevolent expression and smiled. Morgan grimaced, then sighed. What a frustrating day. Everyone seems inclined to point out how young and inexperienced I am. Sunny made himself busy chewing. At the same time, he sent Nephis a mental question through the Blessing of Dusk.
What's up with them?
She showed no sign of having heard him, playing her part perfectly. However, a moment later he received her response. Don't mind their games. They're just playing. It only helps Morgan to be seen as an inexperienced beneficiary of nepotism, and for Matic to be seen as an envious man who is full of bitter resentment toward his younger brother. In truth, she is probably the more formidable of the two, and Valor's unity is like a monolith. Sunny poured himself a cup of strong coffee.
More formidable of the two? Really?
Nephis was looking in the window, not in terms of combat power, but she is young. Once Morgan becomes a saint, Matic, or any other saint perhaps, won't stand a chance against her.
That makes me feel a bit better, so I'm not too much of a loser for being crushed by her in less than 40 seconds.
Their short duel in the dreamscape was still fresh in his memory. The exchange of thoughts with Nephis only took a couple of seconds. It was just enough time for Morgan to turn to her and ask, "What about you, sister? Do you perhaps consider me unworthy of leading this expedition as well?" "Well, indeed, I'm not quite as distinguished of a leader as my dear sister. Do you think you should have been in charge instead?" As Sunny shifted uncomfortably, Neff looked at Morgan, calmly held her gaze for a couple of moments, and then said in an even tone, "If I wanted to be in charge, I would have been." The heiress of valor fell silent, then suddenly laughed. "Ah, that is why I like you, Changing Star. Am I not blessed to suddenly get such a wonderful little sister?" Although she was smiling, her eyes remained sharp as a cold blade. Morgan looked away from Nephis and turned her attention to Sunny. "I hear that a lot has happened to you after we last met, Master Sunless. The Devil of Antarctica has a nice ring to it. Who would have thought that such a pleasant young man would earn such a fearsome reputation? It does make me regret the fact that you had turned down the invitation to enter Clan Valor, though." Sunny glanced at her over his plate and smiled. "I'm not going to lie. I did regret that decision myself a couple of times." Then he shrugged and turned his attention back to the food. "However, what's done is done. And hey, that's fate for you. Despite everything, we're still going to end up fighting side by side, and maybe even against each other. When that happens, your regret will only grow." Morgan nodded. When she spoke, her voice sounded a little cold. "Indeed, life is truly unpredictable. The first time we met, it was because you had crushed a certain person to escape his prison and played a role in the death of one of Valor's saints. And now, we might be seeing that person very soon, and you are enjoying a meal with me. What a funny turn of events." Sunny looked at her for a few moments, then shook his head. "You're right. It's kind of funny. However, you are wrong if you think that we'll see that guy. Knowing him, you won't see him coming up until the moment he plunges a knife into your back." Whispering Blade's face slowly grew dark. Looking at Sunny, he said in a neutral tone, "From your words, it's hard to understand whether you despise that abomination or admire him, Ascended Sunless." Sunny laughed. "No matter how I feel about that guy, the point is, I would prefer to do it from a distance." Saint Maddox studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Wise." Hearing that, Morgan chuckled. "Indeed. Then, Master Sunless, let's wait and see how good your luck is." After that, all casualness drained from Morgan's voice. When she looked at Nephis, her face was just like it had been the moment she tore Sunny's heart apart in the dreamscape. Cold and sharp, emanating a lethal sense of danger, without her even trying to. How much does she know? Hearing that question, Neff shrugged slightly. Her answer was simple. Enough. Morgan sighed, then smiled from the corner of her mouth. "I see. That makes it easier. I'll speak comfortably then." Sunny studied the two of them for a few moments, then asked with a bit of curiosity in his voice, "Really? Aren't you concerned that I'll report everything you say to St. Cor?" Whispering Blade chuckled. He was mostly keeping silent before, but it was impossible to mistake him for a passive observer. Just by sitting there, the Elder of Clan Valor radiated a sense of overwhelming, domineering power. It was as though he owned this room, or every room he found himself in, rather. Saint Maddox glanced at Sunny with indifference. "So what if you do?" And that was it. That was all he had to say to make Sunny understand that Whispering Blade did not care if Wake of Ruin knew all about their conversations, not because there was nothing to hide, but simply because the government was not anywhere near being in a position to act on such information. It was irrelevant. Sunny suddenly felt a compulsion to cut the indifference off the saint's face with the blade of Sin of Solace. However, he did not let any of it show on his face. Instead, Sunny smiled pleasantly and nodded. "Makes sense. Sorry. It was a stupid question." Morgan leaned back, considering something. Eventually, she said, "Whether that person comes or not is unclear. However, the rest of the force the Queen of Worms has sent is all but confirmed by now. It's good to know who we are dealing with, but there were some last-minute changes. We must be ready to adjust our strategy accordingly." The Queen of Worms? Sunny wondered if that was Kisong's true name, her title, or simply a derisive nickname Valor had given her. Morgan and Whispering Blade were seemingly ignoring his presence, speaking mostly for Neff's benefit. They were both looking at her at least. Saint Maddox's voice was a bit listless.
"One of her vassal saints, Dire Fang, has been here in the southern quadrant for a while now. He is a ferocious fighter, but we don't need to be too concerned about him. Sky Tide alone will be enough to keep the brute in check."
He lingered for a moment, then added,
"But the other two are Kisong's daughters. They are worthy of our concern. We already knew that Silent Stalker was escorting their awakened across the ocean. She is a dangerous one. Stalker is a huntress, so she is both strong and cunning. Dealing with her will be hard, but we can manage that as well."
Whispering Blade looked at Nephis and Morgan heavily.
"However, it is the third one that we must be wary of. Beastmaster. That demoness is the true horror in terms of personal power. I alone am her equal. Even then, that depends on the battlefield. Here in Antarctica, she will have a tremendous advantage."
Sunny, who had been keeping his mouth shut, finally couldn't help himself and asked, "How so?" Saint Maddox spared him a glance. For whatever reason, he even decided to answer.
"Both Silent Stalker and Beastmaster are Song's adopted daughters. However, not all of them are the same. Stalker is deadly, but Beastmaster is more than that. She is one of the most feared saints in the world. That is because she is an enchantress of sorts. Beastmaster can enthrall people. Much worse, she can also enthrall beasts and even nightmare creatures. I hope I don't have to explain how such a power can be advantageous here in Antarctica."
Sunny grew quiet. That was right. Maddox didn't have to explain. With myriads of abominations flooding the continent, a saint with the power to subjugate them would be a nightmare to fight against. Who needs transcendent echoes when you can have corrupted creatures serving you? Still, there had to be a limit to Beastmaster's power. No one was invulnerable. Suddenly, Nephis sent him a mental message. "What do you think?" Sunny sighed. He knew a bit about Dire Fang, the vassal saint of Song, who had been sent to the southern quadrant at the start of the campaign. He was a savage and tremendously lethal fighter, and also an aloof and reticent loner. In terms of power, Sunny would have put him above Kor, but below Tyrus. So then, the opposing forces were like this. On one side, there were Dire Fang and two adopted daughters of Kisong, Silent Stalker and Beastmaster. There was also Mordred, most likely. On the other side, there was Saint Tyrus, Whispering Blade, and one more transcendent of Clan Valor. Since Maddox did not mention the latecomer, that person must not have been on the same level as him. Perhaps comparable to Silent Stalker. There were also Morgan and Nephis, and Cassia. People who underestimated the unassuming blind girl were doomed to end up in early graves. He lingered for a moment, then responded,
"It seems like the odds are stacked slightly in Valor's favor."
Nephis looked at him calmly. "I agree, and that is precisely why we should feel nervous." Sunny blinked.
"Us? Since when do I care about what Song has in store for Valor?"
Granted, he was a special envoy now. He would be accompanying the forces of Valor across East Antarctica, and maybe even beyond. That put him in a wonderful position to keep an eye on the actions of the Great Clan, but it also meant that should Song stage a sudden attack on their enemy, he would be directly in the way.
But what exactly are they hiding in their sleeve?
At that moment, Morgan suddenly looked at him and said, her voice tinged with a bit of curiosity, "Oh, there's also going to be a third daughter, an Ascended, Song Shan. Little is known about her, considering that she had spent close to a decade lost in the Dream Realm. The two of you would know her better than me, since she also comes from the Forgotten Shore. So, what is she like?" Sunny and Nephis glanced at each other, feeling unease. After a few moments of silence, he answered,
"Trouble. If I had to describe her with one word, it would be that. She's trouble."
Not long after, it was time to meet the emissaries of Song. Sunny found himself feeling a bit curious. After all, he was not too familiar with the great clan that ruled the northwest reaches of the human territories in the Dream Realm. By all accounts, the Song clan was no less storied and powerful than Valor. Its foundation had not been as great, but after Ki Song rose to prominence and became one of the first humans to transcend, the power of her clan utterly eclipsed that of the older, better established legacy families. As far as Sunny could remember knowing anything, Clan Song was one of the three most exalted powers in the world. Their influence spread far and wide, and their home in the Dream Realm, Ravenheart, an ancient place built between the snowy peaks and smoldering volcanoes of an impregnable mountain chain, was universally considered one of the great citadels of humanity. With a population rivaling that of Bastion, Ravenheart was a beautiful and severe place, from what Sunny knew. Strangely enough, it was not nearly as popular and well known as the colossal castle that Clan Valor ruled. The whole Great Clan Song was a little mysterious. The image of Bastion was etched into the minds of all humans by countless dramas and films, with countless stories of romance and valor taking place in its stone walls. The land of snow and ash where Clan Song ruled, however, was rarely depicted, and when it was always to show something distant and exotic. Whether it was because Ki Song did not care about mundane fame, or because Anvil put more effort into building the public image of his clan, Sunny did not know. He did, however, know that through pure coincidence, his own path had also mostly crossed with the representatives of Clan Valor. Valor were the ones in control of the northernmost territory carved out by humanity in the Dream Realm, where it brushed against the Hollow Mountains, and so that was where he had gone after becoming an Awakened. From the sanctuary of Noctis to the Night Temple, Sunny had met many servants of Anvil of Valor, killing some of them, and then had the misfortune of meeting the Sovereign Son in the flesh. With the complications that followed, it was fair to say that he knew Valor pretty well. The same could not be said about Song, though all his experience with that domain was limited to having met Shan in the Dark City. Even then, Sunny was not at all close with the former leader of the Handmaidens, so it was not like she had shared stories of her clan with him. So naturally, Sunny was curious. His curiosity was mixed with a bit of dread, though. They entered the spacious reception hall once again. This time it was Wake of Ruin, who had been waiting there for some time, speaking quietly with Jet. The staff member who had escorted Sunny and the emissaries of Valor tactfully disappeared, and the gaunt saint greeted them with a curt nod.
"You're here. I hope you rested well. There is a lot to discuss, so we probably won't be sleeping tonight."
Whispering Blade smiled coldly.
"I wouldn't dream of it."
Sunny blinked a couple of times, startled.
Was that a pun? By the dead gods, I hope it wasn't,
he thought. The conversation died before receiving the chance to start, because right at that moment, something imperceptible seemed to change in the world. A cold breeze blew through the hall, and then 4 people were standing in the middle of it, just like the 4 emissaries of Valor had a few hours ago. Sunny involuntarily held his breath. He had seen Dire Fang from afar once, some time ago. The grim man had not changed much, except for the fact that there were ugly bruises and half-healed lacerations on his body this time. He was of medium height, with an angular face and powerful muscles rippling under his dusty skin. The Transcendent wore a sleeveless vest that left his broad shoulders and powerful arms exposed. His hair was dark and disheveled, like the fur of a wild beast. A thick beard covered the lower part of his gloomy face, and his eyes were harsh and piercing. Saint Direfang emanated a feeling of wildness, savage power, and ferocity, as if the world turned a little more primal wherever he appeared.
Dangerous.
Sunny studied the man for a moment, then turned his attention to the newcomer. His heart trembled. The woman standing next to Direfang was not outwardly seductive, but for whatever reason, she seemed almost irresistibly alluring. Where Whispering Blade was dignified and domineering, she was breathtaking and tantalizing. She was tall, with fair skin and red, sensual lips. Her cold beauty was only made more striking by her inviting dark eyes, which were full of strength and willpower. Beastmaster had long hair that fell like a waterfall of black silk and wore a simple dress of carmine fabric, which nevertheless looked regal and mesmerizing on her slender figure. Her face was a little aloof and a little humorous. It was the kind of face one never wanted to look away from. Sunny felt a pang of fear when he saw her. Now he understood why Matic had called her a demoness. The daughter of Qi Song did indeed resemble a beautiful demon. Even if he had not known that she was one of the most terrifying saints in existence, he would have felt it, simply from the fact that he immediately wanted to discard that knowledge and step closer to her.
Snap out of it.
Maybe Sunny would have fallen for Beastmaster's enchanting beauty if he was young and inexperienced, but after meeting beings like Soulvein and Hope, he was somewhat immune to such charms. He shifted his gaze to Song Shan, also known as Bloodlord, to distract himself from the enticing visage of Beastmaster.
Bad idea.
Now that she had become a master, Shan's exotic beauty was even more striking. Hers was a different kind of beauty. Though it was poised, reserved, graceful, and exquisite, Shan was one of the awakened, whose appearance had been changed by her aspect. Her skin was of a strange gray color, which made her look both inhuman and riveting. However, Sunny could not forget her other, monstrous face. He had seen her transform into a hideous creature during the siege of the Crimson Spire, after all. And even before that, he had seen what her victims looked like after being drained of blood. He sighed mentally.
These monsters are beautiful monsters. Are all of Qi Song's adopted daughters like that? What the hell has she done to them?
And speaking of monsters, finally he looked at the 4th member of Song's vanguard. It was a middle-aged man in heavy armor, his face bleak and unfamiliar. His eyes, however, were perfectly human, with not even a hint of Mad Prince hiding in their depths. Sonny frowned.
Yeah, I'm not fooled. There's no chance that Mordred would miss an opportunity to come and wage war against Valor. It's you, isn't it, bastard?
He lingered for a few moments, and then addressed the bleak man.
Long time no see.
The bleak man looked back at him, a masterfully crafted expression of confusion appearing on his face. His lips parted in a polite smile.
I'm sorry, I don't think we've met.
The smile almost looked mocking. Sonny shook his head, then looked away. Wake of Ruin frowned slightly. His grating voice sounded a little irritated.
Now that everyone is here, let's skip the introductions. I extend my gratitude to the elders of the Great Clan Valor and the Great Clan Song for coming to our aid in a time of need. Come, let's start. We need to discuss the war.